the Cellar one more time. Got a number of things to talk about here tonight, and then kind of an opinion piece towards the end. At the end, actually. And just to mix things up this time, I decided to answer them in reverse order that I received them, just for the hell of it. Don't let your heads explode. I don't allow evil PCs unless I know the player well. In my experience, 90% of the time, players play evil or worse. Chaotic neutral PC, or worse, chaotic neutral PCs, an excuse for their own selfish or toxic behavior. The game is a social function first and foremost, and disruptive players break that social contract. In regard to Paladins, one of my favorite PCs was a Paladin, but was not preachy and never went full-on Inquisition. Whatever happened to, I am flawed, and I must strive to be the best I can before I judge anyone else. That's a pretty common trope, but it's missing for Paladins. I agree. My thoughts about Paladins are many and varied, most of them not kind. I don't know why players have to play Paladins in the way that so many of them do. Like, I'm not trying to disrespect anybody's spiritual beliefs, but it's like, oh, a miracle has overcome me. Now I'm a paladin, and I'm gonna play this perfect character, and I'm gonna go around smiting everybody that's evil. I just saw something pop up on Chrome about, do I have a favorite colored dragon? It was a comment. I didn't see it. Well, I'll answer it. Yeah, green. It's because my favorite color is green. If there was a burgundy dragon or a maroon dragon, that would be my favorite. Okay, let's go back to the social contract. Yeah, we do when we sit down. Case in point, we're still working to get the group off at the library, but it's coming along. I had a few tonight, had a couple that had never played before but were interested. So I said, okay. And while I haven't been running what's been going on the last couple of meetings, I was there for this one, and I'm glad I was, because I had a couple of people that I believe will. I know they had a good time. I know. I think the two that came to play will be back again, and I think the brother that was too dignified to play at the beginning, who I know I had hooked halfway through the escapade, I think they'll probably be back too. And so there's a social contract there that they were sitting down to play a game and to listen to each other, contribute equally to the ideas and the suggested solutions. And I think too many people use being a paladin as an excuse to break that. And I don't know why. They've been bathed in the blood, and now they're goody two shoes personified. They sparkle whenever the sun's rays hit them. Don't know what that is. Don't know. And I have a terrible time every time I hear the word paladin. My mind automatically flashes to a black and white TV show starring Richard Boone, where he played a gunslinger with conscience and who only shot bad guys who deserved it. And I think the gunslinger character personified the paladin a whole lot better than a lot of the players that try to play paladins. Congratulations on your anniversary. Oh, well, several people thanked me, or congratulated, and thank you all. I live in Jacksonville, Florida, and recently looked at old dragons and saw they're actually at Gen Con South here. It was well before I moved here, but I thought it was pretty cool. Did you ever attend? No, that was well after I left. I didn't get involved in that. I recall hearing that Paladins in latest D&D have no alignment restrictions. What is your take on this? Would that make Darth Vader the ultimate lawful evil paladin of Star Wars? Well, if you wanted to take it to ridiculous extremes, yes. All depending upon how you interpret the behavior and what it means to be a paladin, to adhere to a moral code or an ethical code of some sort. And, of course, paladin. The way paladins are played, if they were portrayed by actors, and God knows there's nobody on any of those horrible third-rate acting D&D platforms that could display the angst that a paladin should be going through most of the time. They should be too wrapped up in their own miseries and quests and truth-seeking than to be able to spend their time telling everybody else what to do. Oh well. Your boat, you row. But I guess, yeah, that would make Darth Vader the ultimate lawful evil. Lawful in that he follows a code rigidly. Evil in that he cares nothing for anyone else. Yep. That would. He could be. Yeah, I mean, it's an extreme, let's face it. But yeah, the case could be made. I'd love to hear the favorite character you played. What was their race and class? Kajuk. Dwarf. Very first character that I played. And he ended up being one level higher than whatever the book said they could go to at that time, because he became the king of the dwarves through a series of adventures and happenings at Gen Con. So obviously he went from nothing burger to long lost son. Ta-da! The sun shines underground, and he's now the leader of the dwarves. Kelnor the Blue was a 12th level magic user that I retired. Because believe me, back then 12th level was one. You did not go around fooling with 12th level magic users. If somebody offered you a quest for the big bad evil guy and you found out the big bad evil guy was a 12th level magic user, unless there were several of you that were really potent, powerful, and crafty, you were best to say no thanks. And then there was a character, a sort of a character that became an NPC in the village of Hamlet. And that was the Druid of the Grove, and Giroux. And he became my favorite because when we were writing those and playtesting them and all that, whenever I couldn't make it to play, which was frequently because I had a child and lived in the next town over, so I couldn't always make it over for playtest sessions, they would make up another dirty verse about Tim the Lusty Druid. And so none of those verses are repeatable ever again. That belongs to us only in that moment in time, before you ask. Let's see what's next. I'm definitely taking the avoiding the fatal blow concept for hit points. I recently agreed to run a game, but find myself cornered when people that I ask are fine with playing within the scope of medieval fantasy because I don't know how to specialize the game around their interests. The situation is both a blessing and a curse. Such a case, how'd you proceed? Well, my world is my world. And if you want to start a new campaign up or whatever, then you as the DM establish the beginning of the campaign. Now, if you're going to run an adventure, then you have to, for already established player characters, then you have to establish some sort of criteria, some sort of qualifications. But your world, you don't have to, you should not bend to the whims of your players. Certainly not in the beginning. Now, nobody sits down with a fully developed world to run their first adventure where they're trying to chase some goblins out of the woods as first and second levels. But as your world develops, it has to develop along lines commensurate with the player character's skills and abilities and capabilities. And you can't forget that capability. It's your world. Set it up the way you want. Allow player character types that you allow. Don't be browbeaten by, I want this special treaty shares 3 different fields. No, don't. Determine what you're going to allow and allow nothing else, because anything else is going to be a mind bender on you, and that's not where we're at. While the players may write the story, you edit it and shape it and help direct it where it needs to go. Never forget that. So, their interests, you've got to make a world so interesting that they're interested in it. A campaign so thrilling, an adventure so entrancing. That's all. Additionally, for this same group, I went a bit insane. Yeah, and this is insane. Started creating a new magic system, as I know some of the players won't like the normal Vancian magic. Well, hey, your world, your systems, your rules. And if they don't like it, well, what you have gone on to describe here to me sounds slightly insane. Vancian magic and Nefarian magic, which you gain by attracting and contracting to the Fae, wearing silly robes of symbols. Dream magic that is determined by a good night's sleep of inspirational dreaming. Divination magic, but it's more an inspirational practice than an actual spell casting. Good luck. Sounds like you made it way more complex than it needs to be. But that's just my opinion. That intro was hilarious. Yes, Jim does come up with some great stuff once in a while, doesn't he? All right, another one. I played Killer. Yeah, that's what it was formerly called back in college in the mid-'80s. I remember it being a lot of fun. Fortunately, nothing bad ever happened. Well, that must have been the second time it came around. Because first time it came around, there were several incidents in several cities in the Midwest where people were mistaken for... We had a kid shot in the foot a couple of years back here in Cincinnati area playing Nerf Wars with his friends. Somebody saw somebody creeping around the back of the house out in the really nice suburb that they live in. And, a kid ends up getting shot for Nerf wars. Not the best idea. If you want to go out and shoot each other, then go to a paintball site, don camos, coveralls, whatever. Get your goggles and your hat and your paintball gun. Believe me, it's a buttload of fun, and at the same time, it'll quell a lot of your less well thought out urges about doing stuff like this. Believe me. And they sting. Yes, they do. Mentioned playing mostly theater of the mind back in the day. Were there a lot of people at that time who had fun playing the mapper? Seems people these days don't think it wouldn't have been fun to have that role. There were a lot of tricks in earlier dungeons that were there to confuse the mapper, i.e. rooms that rotated, spiral stairway, hallways, corridors that magically went 120 feet, when the party seemed to have only gone 10, etc. Do you have any opinion as to the role of the mapper during a game? Do you have any stories from your games of tricks that you played on mappers? I played very few tricks on mappers. It was hard enough to be a good map. In the earlier days of playing, a lot of the mappers tried to draw both walls and put in the doors and symbols for when they found a door and whatever, and then on the other side of the door if they went in, etc. Okay. And that's very tedious and very easy to get screwed up. Later on, experienced mappers and more experienced players took to making what I would call an arrow map. It's just a line that gives you the general direction that the party moved in. You can put in notes for the width of the corridor or whatever. And you go, we went 50 feet and we bent to the right. And so you put a line, 50, bent it to the right, and just went through and marked doors. It didn't bother about the walls and that because it was faster and it was easier. And it was often easier to read afterwards because there was less on the paper to confuse you. I found that in my first group, there were two guys that were just really excellent mappers. Excellent mappers. I believe that in any given handful of gamers, role players, there's somebody who's pretty good at mapping. I think that the ones that mapped did because they enjoyed it. Now at first it was like, who's going to map? No, not me, I don't want to. No, oh, come on. And somebody got forced into doing it. Well, very often the people that got forced into doing it ended up enjoying it. And it gives a sense of superiority and power when all of a sudden the party turns to you and says, get us the hell out of here. And it's up to you. And if you did your job, you all get out. And if you didn't, well, some or all of you might not. It seemed to me that being the mapper was a solemn responsibility, but still a lot of fun because you knew that everybody depended upon your skill and ability. You knew it. And you let them know it every now and again, too, if you were that good. I looked up there and said, Sunday the 20th, I'll be playing in Okinawa. Well, my image will be in Okinawa. All right, let's see. Where are we? Okay. I didn't feel it was right to... The rotating room, I felt that was fair. I didn't do too much screwing around with corridors and passageways. Though occasionally, if they're what I would do is if they'd been down there before and had a reasonable certainty that they had it right, every once in a while I'd put an illusion in and made it look like there was a cave in or something, or that it went on farther than they thought it had. But nothing ever that was going to cause the party great bodily harm. There's enough other ways to do that. Don't need to do it that way. Monster magic. How do you handle magic-wielding monsters? And for that matter, how do you rate pitting the players against evil wizards? Does it increase the cognitive load on DMs if they introduce spellcasting monsters? Well, unless the monster is the big bad evil guy who has some degree of free will and free movement and free action, I don't allow monsters, the majority of the monsters, of what we call monsters. And isn't it funny? Everything that isn't a player character or a non-player character is a monster. I don't let my monsters, I don't give them a lot of free will and options unless they're the big bad evil guy. So I pretty well know that if there's something in the roaming around the dungeon that's got some mild level effect or mild level spell ability or whatever, I just kind of, when they encounter each other, I roll and see what happens. I don't write out a chart in advance of if he rolls this, and that happens, and if he rolls that. No. That would make your head explode. Especially if you had more than one type of magic-using monster running around at the same time in the same adventure. That would easily make your head explode if you tried to remember all that. So, no, I don't. If a creature has a minor ability or skill, make itself look like it's standing next to itself or something like that, that's not so much magic, and it's not conjuring or anything of that nature where you're burning feathers and throwing in pinches of something that makes it all sparkle purdy. Degree, I guess. Degree. Spellcasting monsters should be used very sparingly. I mean, good God, there's so many monsters that can't cast spells that are still horrendous, that have innate abilities that would seem to be a spell. It's just something they do. Why make it harder? All right, now we got a long rant here about Hasbro going on and what they have and haven't done. And some people are saying that they finally killed the brand because the 5.5 flopped miserably. So I'm just going to read some of this, and then I'll talk about it later. Hasbro seems to have finally admitted they don't have the slightest bit of talent at Wizards. They seem to have laid off everyone but the interns who made some of the worst-selling 5e modules / adventures ever. Most of these people earned their unemployment by going to war with the RPG community multiple times. I've never seen people who hate their customers so much and were out there trying to war with the gamers on social media. Can't argue most of that sentiment. They was some of the dumbest shit I've ever seen. Instead of listening to the gamers, tell them what they want, and filtering it they just said, screw it, we don't care what they want. We're going to do what we want to do. And they forged ahead and did it, and it was not what gamers wanted, and the gamers did not buy it in droves. Stayed away in droves. Most of the speculation around D&D is a brand that they will license the next edition of D&D to for someone else to write. Hopefully it's Trolls, Goodman, Kelsey Dion, or someone else with the actual talent and respect for the traditions. Obviously, it could go either way, but we know it was never going to get better with the past regimes at Wizards in place. Also, I never understood why D&D, current D&D, doesn't have a D&D 5e basic /expert /light and fast, D&D 5e lots of tables and crunch, D&D 5e tactical, D&D 5e old school gritty, and you probably won't live, and D&D 5e high fantasy save the world, D&D fairies, and D&D 5e fairies, and furries get your kink on with a druid who turns into a bear, D&D 5e totally not just Pokemon or Avatar, D&D 5e Lankmar, D&D Tolkien, or close enough, D&D 5e Dying Planet, etc., Jurassic Fantasy, Vikings. Hasbro did this with every other game. Goodman does it, and does it well. It isn't just Monopoly with different street names. They're actually cool games, like Mutant Crawl Classics or Empires of the East. I tend to buy every one so far, except XCC. I'm not sure why Wizbro limited themselves so much. Well, I have some ideas why that might be, because the corporate mindset was so radically different, coming up from what TSR was, who sold it to Wizards, who had some good success with it for a while at Wizards, and with numbers that make sense for the gaming industry, and then sold it to Hasbro, who thought those numbers were way too small to be profitable, and therefore tried. It just didn't mesh well. They didn't understand each other. My take. They didn't understand each other, and therefore, without being willing to bend on either party's case, they were doomed from the start. And as finding somebody good to write it, why bother? If you're that good a writer, write your own goddamn game and kick this game in the ass where it belongs. Why would Kelsey Dion want to write for them when she's already got a great game, Shadow Dark, and possibly take away, when Shadow Dark might end up replacing, might end up being a substitute? Why they didn't do all that stuff? Because they didn't want to do it in small enough numbers. They weren't going to sell, if they sold a copy, if they sold 400,000 copies of a game, 5e something or other, 5e whatever, they didn't see that they weren't going to sell 400,000 modules. They might sell only 20,000, and scaling down like that just didn't make sense for the suits at Hasbro. Even after they brought in a couple of the people from Wizards and into Hasbro, they still couldn't figure that out. I don't know. The problem wasn't money. I heard they hired hundreds of programmers since 2000, although some may have been for Wizard Hasbro's projects that had overlap. For that crap-ass VTT they turned out. Yes, that was pretty crap-ass, wasn't it? The virtual tabletop. What a piece of shit. Hasbro Wizards often mentioned playing on your phone, so I expected that to be some Monopoly Go type situation adapted to D&D. Yeah, well, like I said, like we all know, they've screwed the pooch in several fashions. 25, 30 years from now, somebody will write a book about how Hasbro destroyed a money-making mega product. Here we go. Larger groups with hirelings, etc., made much more sense to me. Would you really move down into that unknown dungeon, cave, or mine, thought to be inhabited by hordes of orcs or whatever with 3 to 5 people? Of course not, unless you were on some absolute stealth mission. Yes, exactly. A new campaign where, hey, I've got it on good that such and such has been, the ruins of such and such have been located, should be like a small archaeological expedition. 5 to 7 player characters, numerous NPC hirelings, specialists, numerous wranglers, pack bearers, whatever, and they're up on top at base camp while you go down and do the dangerous stuff, and they're digging around looking for new doors and and whatever, for new ways in. I've always felt that spirit would support everything that the game does. You got to rest up for the night. Fine, you go back to base camp, which is the expedition's headquarters, and you rest there, and you get your food there, and you go back in the next day, and you continue until you find whatever it was you were looking for in the first place. Great. My problem with people assuming that hit points is the ability to dodge a blow is that we already use the ability to dodge a blow by adding a dex bonus to armor class. No, we all don't. What edition are you talking about here? Then again, I know that you stay in OD&D and AD&D where it makes more sense. Yes, I do. You don't need all that other crap. It's extraneous. It's nitpicking. It's rules lawyering. You don't need it. You don't need it. I ran an adventure for 2 players who had never. There were 2 players in the group that had never played before. Never played a role-playing game before. And I made it real simple. I boiled it all down to real simple mechanics. Only a few numbers that they had to know. And we played for an hour and a half, and they had a great time, and it was time to stop. They'd never played before, but we played. Just real rules light. You don't need a lot of rules right off the bat. You scare people off if you get them into combat tables and stuff. I made them all I made them all attendees at a fitness and training camp. And they all had staffs that were as tall as their eyes. And they worked out with them and they trained with them and stuff. So they were proficient in staff fighting, rudimentary staff fighting. Why we didn't have to get into swords and bucklers and shields and all that. The goblins came and stole something from their camp. They went off and they hunted down the goblins and they got it back. Very easy. Never needed more than a few numbers. The rest is just frills, ribbons, and bows. Nothing wrong with ribbons and bows. Nothing wrong with getting into long campaigns that last for months and months in real time. Nothing wrong with that at all. I think it's great if you can sustain it. All right, now that's because we don't do that. We'll continue now. Okay, yes, it makes much less sense in the hit point explosions in 4 and 5. You're right. You could argue that any attribute could be used to help you avoid damage. You're right, you could. But, that's just it. You don't. This is what does that. That does these. That's the way the world works. Ta-da! Easy peasy simple. Let's see, where else are we in here? Wisdom, wise experience, you can parry. No, not necessarily. No. It is what it is, what it is. It works for the early editions. It doesn't make much sense in 5e, but then again, I don't think a lot of 4 and 5e make much sense to begin with. But that's just my opinion. Your mileage may vary. Did I ever play around with any system that had damage reduction instead of hit points? Nope. Nope. Not even sure exactly what that would be. When I was a teen, we had disc gun wars. We did it on school campus. Now that would no doubt get you in ridiculous amounts of life-altering trouble. Yeah, the little foam discs about this big. Yeah. I'll tell you what. If you want to talk about crazy wars, at Ralph Partha in their factory, every year around the holidays, they would have the Christmas wars. And it accelerated a little bit each year, got crazier and crazier. The foam disc guns, then it was something else that shot, and then pretty soon it was dart guns, and it was Nerf guns. And each Christmas it would get crazier and crazier. Great fun, though. For several days we all had a good time. Bunch of chronologically grown men playing guns. I'm not a big fan of multi-classing, especially since games like D&D have a huge range of classes that often bridge classes already. In modern fantasy role-playing games, I'm more inclined now to say you can only be one class. But you can specialize in that class by choosing a subclass early on. If you change class, and your character is not at least first level, it must be to a related class, and there are penalties. But you no longer have your previous class. For example, a 6th level thief wants to become a professional assassin. They're related. However, said thief needs to go to assassin school, have a mentor, be in a different guild, and learn new stuff. Well, okay, if that's what you want to say. Or you as a DM could say, okay, that character is going to not be available for you to play in the regular campaign in this because he's going off to assassin school for 6 months. And you just abstract the whole thing, and at the end of 6 months of campaigning game time, hey, he's back, here's his new stats, done. Easy peasy. You know, and yeah, it's all three. Let's see, what else? It's going to take off his old guild or gang, and the kid's pretending to be a thief. Well, that's whatever. That's whatever each individual DM wants to make of it. If the DM wants to take it there, he can. All sorts of double crosses and all that good stuff. Okay, this friend of mine, and he's been collating, making copies of OD&D articles in the Dragon, and he now has HTML versions of all the OD&D, and he also included every O or AD&D letter to the editor, me, when I was there. Can Can you please tell the story about how you and Gary locked yourself in a room for... Oh, no. I've told this story. Gary asked me on a Thursday or Friday, "What's your week like? Or I guess it was on a Wednesday. What's next week look like?" I said, "I don't know, pretty light." And he says, "Well, clear it for me." So I spent Thursday and Friday getting all caught up, cleared, and the magazine was off to the press anyway. It was the way it was timed out, so we had several days of lag time. And I came in, and he told the people answering the phone that nobody was to interrupt he or I, except for our wives, because neither one of us were idiots. And we then proceeded to cut up several sets of the little brown books and stick this part on this wall and that part on this wall and this part over here. And in so doing, we basically formatted what would be the basic and what, more importantly, what wouldn't be in the basic. No demons, no devils. Okay? We were looking for a kid-friendly version, and John Eric Holmes did an excellent job. And what was over here became first edition Advanced Dungeons and Dragons. And we tinkered with this and tinkered with that, and all the changes that you saw between OD&D and first edition, that's where most of them came in. And we gave the first book to Mike, said, "Here, Mike," and off we went, and the rest is history. But I've had to tell that story so many times now. I always considered Dream World adventures to take place in part of the ethereal plane or in the deepest dreams, the astral plane. It's a way to allow lower level parties to experience adventures outside the material plane. Okay. If you're into planar travel, okay. That's great, real easy device. Do you recall when D&D first started using the ethereal and astral planes as adventure locations? No, I do not. I do not believe that was, well, I know it was not while I was still active in TSR games, which would have been all things having to do with D&D. I know that Gary had me publish, or I shouldn't say, he didn't force me. I published this weird article about the planes of existence. It was Gary's and Brian's first dive into that nature. And as far as I can remember, that was the first time they really got into that. And when they started writing adventures for it or whatever, I have no idea. It was just, there were things, spells that happened using the ethereal plane or whatever, but as far as adventures taking place in those planes, I have no idea, and I don't even know why anybody would want to. Because, well, I can't see as a DM creating a story that would make you want to do that. I just wouldn't. I realize now I use 4 different kinds of NPC help in my games. Number 1, NPC party members, the rarest and potentially most powerful, basically another party member who gains an equal share. Henchmen, the loyal retainers of an individual party member, limited by charisma. They get a smaller share. Hirelings, low-level mooks, what we call meat shields, paid a wage and possibly a small share. Don't gain experience except under special circumstances. May break in combat. And then followers, like hirelings but recruited en masse by a high-level fighter. Yeah, those are all legitimate NPCs. If you didn't have them, you wouldn't have any wars or any fights or any skirmishes. All right. Paladins. What would it take to get you to like Paladins? Or are they a lost cause in your mind? Well, I touched on this earlier. A person could play a Paladin the way they were meant to have been played. Not not the Lone Ranger with a Texas Ranger badge and a flaming six-shooter, striking evil, striking fear into the hearts of evil. Okay. Axis and allies. Do you plan on adding psionics to your homebrew rules for Axis and allies? As a matter of fact, I do. I thought I would put another. There's a couple of those technological breakthroughs that I'm just going to give, and I'm going to replace them from something else. And I thought we'd give the Nazis and the Japanese a mind control ray, and they could use it on each other and create the perfect master race. Of course, it wouldn't work on anybody with sense. And no. Which retro clone is closest to OD&D? The one I like the best, the one I respect the most, is probably Swords and Wizardry. Though I get strong vibes from Shadow Dark. Talking about henchmen and hirelings makes me want to ask your opinion about the place of encumbrance and logistics, especially in a system where it's not only gold acquisition but successful transport. I do think there's been an overall decline in the use of hirelings, let alone henchmen. And I'm not talking about getting bogged down in the nitty-gritty of accounting for every inch and ounce. I see where you're coming from. And again, it's a matter of degree and what you feel comfortable with. If I'm running and there's an adventure that isn't the archaeological, the supported base camp, etc., and they find a huge hoard of silver, and I'm not gonna make them count out the silver, but I am gonna make them remind them of encumbrance, and if it were, carting off the ore from the caved-in mine that's now accessible again, yeah, it's a matter of degree. But I've said before, I ran an adventure where there was a colony of mutated giant bees that made this phenomenal honey that you could make a mead out of that was a cure wound potion, basically. And they found gallons and gallons and gallons of it, and they had no way to carry it out. No pots, no pans, no buckets, no nothing. You have to take into account practical considerations for encumbrance and carrying things out. I'm not going to let a party do a Yosemite Sam and fill their pockets all to bulging with doubloons and then run full speed and outrun the pursuit. Am I going to sit down and measure out on a little thing on a tablet exactly how many silver pieces they can pick up before? No. I don't get into the minutia. I might just decide, 654 pieces of silver, and it weighs, whatever. I generally will have something of that nature figured out in advance. And if you're doing the archaeological expedition with the pack bearers and everything else, well then yes, logistics, that's why you're doing it. You've got the logistics covered. Which is why it used to be really rough when we would be adventuring and we had our horses or our mules or whatever all tied securely in a secure camp and a trusted et cetera, watching over him for us, and the trusted whatever gets his throat cut, we come up and we got no pack horses, we got no nothing, and we got loot we want to carry. So now what loot do we throw away because we have no way to carry it? So there are times when I certainly pay attention to it, but I don't get into the minutia. I don't. It's not the parts that I enjoy. I'm the anti-bean counter, which is probably why I've always not gotten along so well with bean counters. Certainly common sense. 9,000 pieces of gold is definitely going to slow you down. Not only that, but it's going to encumber you in bulk. And, again, all depending upon how you've set up your currency. So if you don't want encumbrance to be a big deal in regards to currency, don't make bigger coins. Instead of using, the rough equivalent of, for those of you watching this in the United States and environments and territories, etc., we use the silver dollar, the half dollar, the quarter. We use those to say, to get a sense of size. And then there was a silly article about how much gold weighed and, whatever for the bean counters. Just that it weighs a lot. It weighs a lot. A little bit. You see him shake out that little bit on the scale on some of these programs on TV. And it weighs a lot. That little bit. So yeah, I do. Some. Pay attention to those types of things. But only if I have to. Only if I have to. And it's been a long, long time since I've run a continual campaign. For the last 20 years, I've run one-offs. I had a conversation with a coworker once about our D&D games we played as kids and teenagers. He mentioned that once he transported his players to a world where magic worked in reverse. For example, a light spell would have the effect of a dark spell, and cure light wounds would have the effect of cause light wounds. I could see it effective arcane magic in that way, but I wasn't convinced that divine magic would be affected. I didn't argue the point as it was his game, but I was wondering what your thoughts on how divine magic could be affected by other sources. Well, here we go into that strange gray area that we all inhabit when it comes to squeamishness about conventional religion, how we were raised, and what we're doing in fantasy playing around. And everybody finds a different place in that morass to stake their ground. With very, very few exceptions, I have never dealt with anything that I would consider divine magic. Defining divine as coming from or directly as a result of some god's powers. Now, where you get into the funny part here, where the landmines start popping up, is it capital G-O-D? Is it capital G-A-W-D? You see where I'm going here. How sacrilegious do you want to go? Do you figure it's sacrilegious at all? Okay? I was raised Catholic. I was an altar boy for years and years and the whole thing. And now I'm pretty much not. I was Episcopalian for a while, but I'm not. But I have a little bit of squeamishness still about divines. So I generally say, okay, nothing in my world has anything to do with what other people might believe in the world that I live in and I eat my meals in. So if I made that distinction and if it was there, I don't know. I would think magic being magic, I don't see your patron deity reaching down magically, or is it divinely? Now you start getting into the things that led to the whole satanic panic back in the 80s. And so I've always skirted around that. And if it's a supreme deity, nothing fools with them. That's the way I look at it. Okay, now I keep, this isn't about politics, because I keep politics out of this. I got to put my phone on my charger here while I talk. So this isn't about the politics. This is the reality of what we're talking about right now. And that is that the days of the beautiful, wonderful, full-color board games and full-color hardbound books and all that lovely stuff that came from China is not going to be cheap anymore if it comes at all, because China is one of the countries that's being whacked with tariffs. And the best printing, the last 15 years at least, has been out of China. Just like in the 60s and 70s, the best printing came out of the Low Countries because they had 6-color presses and nobody else did. So they did the tartan books and the flag books and the stuff for the British Museum and what have you. Today, the best color, the highest resolution, the highest quality is coming out of China. There's a number of reasons for that. The factories are subsidized. They pay slave wages. Their paper industry is subsidized. No wonder they're cheap. Now, there's one particular paper that is going to throttle the game business, and that's cardstock. The stuff you need to make cards in the deck. You know what I'm talking about? Slightly glossy, has a resilient snap to it. Okay. As it happened, because of China's great proficiency in producing cardstock, nobody else does. Now, I know what happened with the tariffs, with a load that we had tried to get a hold of. It went up almost 50%. And couldn't afford it. So, it's that. Never claimed. You know, you tell somebody you're going to buy something for $1,000 and then it gets to your house and it says $1,500. Well, and those are just numbers, you know, those weren't the numbers, believe me. So I believe that what we have been seeing in all the beautiful board games, particularly, and I know I have several that I've gotten through Kickstarter that were printed in China. I think that at least while the present administration holds sway and the tariffs are in place, I don't think we're going to see that type of production again. Certainly not in anything affordable. that big, beautiful. Well, take the Axis and Allies Anniversary Edition with all the beautiful plastic pieces and all that. Couldn't afford to produce that in the United States and sell it for $100. You got to look at the retail price and then go back 3, 4, 5 times to find out what it was actually produced at. Because of everybody gets a piece of the pie in the distribution network. Everybody gets a piece of the pie. Anyway, I don't think we're going to see that type of availability anymore. So, some serious changes are going to take place. What's that mean? I'm not sure yet. I do know that there are a couple of companies that have decided they're going to try to address this. First is the Troll Lords, Troll Lord Games, the Chenault brothers, are building from the ground up a printing facility to print games. Okay, now they have an advantage on most other people in that before they were Troll Lord Games, they were printers. And so they are aiming at providing, hey, got a game you want to publish? We can publish it for you. A jobber, if you will. Not even a jobber, a mechanic. We will do this thing for you. Yeah, they'd be a job printer. And there's a second company that also is equipped in a smaller way, has all the necessary trimmers and binders and gluers and, all those things, that's looking to say, okay, we want to help the little guy who only wants to make 50 copies or 100 copies of a softbound or whatever. And that they're looking for the little guys, and the trolls are looking for everybody else. So it may shake out that we'll find a workaround. But there are some things that people are going to have to give up. Going to have to give up the fancy card stock. They're going to have to give up the fancy printing. It's not economically feasible or sustainable to sell at those prices. Can't be done. And it's not just games. I have several items around the house, including it's kind of like a geomorphic puzzle to build your own coral reef. And it has a book, and you identify the various corals and various sea creatures and all that. And it's gorgeous, and you build it however you want, no directions or anything. And it's made in China. I have some board games that are gorgeous, have lots of pieces and all that. They're all made in China. We're going to see a lot of changes. A lot of the hardbound books are not going to be able to be made the way they were because they were being made in China. And it's going to be interesting these next few years to see how it shakes out. But I don't want to be the doom and gloom guy. But I do want to point out that I think that there's tough times ahead for the fancy games that we've grown accustomed to over the last 10, 12, 15 years, having printed in China. That's going to go away. Get used to the idea now. The thing is, see, these wonderful, gorgeous pieces can't be POD. They can't be print on demand. Because you can't do that kind of color work like that. It just, I hate to say it, and I hate to see it, but I think we've seen the heyday of the beautiful high-end deluxe game produced in China. We'll see. Like I said, it all depends on how the tariffs shake out and how long they last. But there will be changes. I'm sure that the trolls would be the first to say that they can't match Chinese prices because they pay their people a living wage. But I'm sure that they'll do the best, the cheapest. They'll do. I know the guys. I know the two brothers, and they love the industry, and they're going to put their money where their mouth is. So keep your eye on that blank billboard that has Troll Lord Games on it, and watch what's coming. And on that note, I will say do Dadagobi. Hello, and welcome to my cellar.
The curmudgeon who wrote about the dungeons. Now he's the feller, live from the cellar. Talks about D&D and old school RPGs. Still quite a feller, the curmudgeon in the cellar. Last man around when them rates went down. Calling Gary in that Lake Geneva town. Hey Gary, it's an awful mess. Let me edit, we'll have success. D&D and Dragon Magazine. He's the curmudgeon who wrote about the dungeons. Now he's the feller, live from the cellar. Talks about D&D and old school RPGs, but he's still quite the feller, the curmudgeon in the cellar. Magic missile, it's a mortar shell. Make it hit in the first level spell. Brought psionics to the game to attack that wizard's brain. ESR and fantasy, collection of micro armory, Titan with tramp under a tree, high as could be. He's the curmudgeon who wrote about the dungeons. Now he's the feller, live from the cellar. Talks about D&D and old school RPGs, but he's still quite the feller, the curmudgeon in the cellar. Still quite the feller, the curmudgeon in the cellar.